turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, if you would, please. That's where we will eventually get to. 1 Corinthians 6, New Testament there. And if you have found that, then I ask you to just bow your heads and let's pray. Lord God, we just ask you for your anointing and your presence with us today, Lord, as we go through your word and talk about this, Lord. We thank you for what Valentine's Day means, Lord. We just ask that, those of us married and those of us, couples, Lord God, that we understand what you mean by love and how that works. And so, Father, as we celebrate that today, Lord, just bless our hearts with grace and peace that we need to know from you what true love is, because you are love. And so, Father, just bless our hearts today, Father. Anoint our ears and our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, we're almost at the end of the journey. I said that last week. I think we're getting close. I'm not exactly sure yet how to totally wind it down. So there might be some fatigue from hearing all of this. So we will get back into a regular book study very soon and get a little less technical. But we're almost at this end of this journey. I know for many of you there's still some questions because I get them, and I think we've covered that. But I understand that for a lot of people, I geek out on this stuff, so it stays in my head all the time, and I'm always in the literature fooling with it, but that's not the case for everybody. So I understand we've been through a lot over the last, 15 weeks or so. So that's a lot to take in. I don't expect anybody to get all of it the first time. That is just not the way anything works. Whether you're in high school, college, or whatever, you go through, you get the basics of it, and then the more you swim in that water, then some of the other stuff starts to stick. So I know there's still some questions. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But we've actually only been a few feet below the surface of this. It really goes a lot deeper. But I'm not, I don't want to just lose folks because we wind up turning this into a seminary lecture class. I don't want to do that either. But no one gets all the points the first time they go through a lesson. As I said last week, we are to meditate on the Bible. That's what it is. It's technically speaking Jewish meditation literature. Chew on the Scriptures and let them form the framework of your life in your mind. So everything we've been talking about, including the notes, are posted on the website. And I talked to enough of you to know that some of you do go back and either print the notes off and then read them while you're listening or what have you. Do that. That's a good idea. Things will become clearer then. But what we're talking about today, as I talked about a little bit last week, is most Christians have only a vague idea of what eternity will be like for us, all of us. We tend to have memories from stories in the Old Testament, and then that somehow is there, from Jonah and the whale to David and Goliath to this and that. Then all of a sudden we jump to the New Testament, and there's John the Baptist and then Jesus, and people just really don't know how all that fits together. Or at best, they have large leaps in the logic and miss a lot of the details. So we don't want that to happen here. So we've been through and we've hit upon the major points that connect the creation to the final restoration of things in the last 2 chapters of Revelation. But as Christians, we really need to understand who we are. We are the sons and daughters of God, but what does that mean? We're saved. And most people just stop there. That's the way I was raised. Okay, here we go. Now, that then translates into a list of things I no longer do. And there's more to it than that. But what does that mean? Well, we've been talking about it for a few weeks now. Most of us have at least some ideas of what that means for us, but many of us have yet to put this reality into practice. And so people ask themselves, all right, now I've received the Lord, the Lord's my Savior, where do I go from here? And the short answer is that you go out and live what you've learned as you've learned it. But that still sometimes is a little hard to cross that bridge. Well, because we have learned that we were created in order that God could have a human family here on earth that actually mirrored His divine family in the heaven, what's called the heavenly host. There's a term I've been using that probably it freaks people out. We probably need a new term for it, but I didn't coin it. Divine counsel, that trips people out if they don't understand what we're talking about. But God wanted everything here to mirror what was going on in the heavenly realm. Earth and those in it, from the original standpoint of creation, were to mirror life in the heavenly realm. And we see in that realm that God works through a group, His family in heaven. We'll hit some of those passages again today. But humanity, on our side of it, just as what happened, you're familiar with the term on earth as it is in heaven. That is more literal than you really actually know a lot of times, because it's been hosed up there also. And you get down here to us, to humanity, and you see that humanity has failed time and again. But that shouldn't, once again, should not surprise us, because of the fact that God's heavenly family also failed. And we can read that in the first verses of Genesis 6. You can read it in Genesis 3 at the fall. You can read it in Deuteronomy 32 that gives you more commentary on that and other verses. So knowing all that, we may then ask ourselves how divine beings who were there at creation, who saw God face to face, and all that He had done in creation, we're going to ask, how could they ever cease to serve Him? Now think about that. It's a pretty heavy thought. You were there as He spoke things into existence. You were there seeing all this come about. You've been there for however long, seeing all this, working hand in hand with God, moving around, there in His presence every day. And then some of them at least still went off the rails. How does that happen? It just seems almost incomprehensible. But, it's no different from what happens here. Israel did the same thing. They saw all that God did before and after the Exodus, yet they still murmured and they wanted to return to Egypt, the very place from which they'd been freed. And once again, as humans, we have to understand we are free moral agents, just as the counsel. And there'll be people within the church world that want to argue that. But you have to understand, if we are the imagers of God, and all that means, all that entails, and we are created in His image, then you have to understand that is why all this has happened. Because if God is free, and certainly He is, and we've been created in His image, then we are free also. The difference is that God is holy and just and righteous. So He always does the right thing. We, on the other hand, are flawed. A lot of us, we know the right thing to do. Mama said, don't reach in the cookie jar. And then as soon as she leaves the kitchen, we know, but we still do those things anyway. So God's heavenly family were free and free to make stupid decisions, and they did. Israel, part of humanity, they were free to make stupid decisions, and they did, and guess what? We're in the same boat. But why would God allow for His creation to be able to choose to follow Him or fall away from Him? And I hear that all the time. Why did God, if He knew it was going to go off the rails, why didn't He change something? And you have to understand that when it comes to love and relationships, close relationships, that freedom has to be there. It has to, in order for love to be all that it was meant to be. Because, I can marry my wife, bring her home, and chain her up in the house if I want, just to keep her there. And so she's in the house. But that does not mean she's there because she loves me. That just doesn't work. She has to be free to leave. And so that is the same logic, if I can use that term, that God has used throughout this. Because at the end of things, by the time we get to the end of the book, Revelation 21 and 22, everybody that is there in a restored earth, in a new global Eden, they are there because they want to be. And for the first time, after the judgment and all that, everybody is on the same page. The Bible asks the question, how can two men walk together except they be in agreement? That means how can you, how can you work together? How can you live together unless you're in agreement on the main things? And none of us agree on everything. But two people that are loggerheads all the time, they're not going to stay together. So at some point in the future, God says, all right, this is it. Everybody that in His foreknowledge is going to follow Him, has made that choice. All of that is worked out. And so now all the folks that are on the wrong side of this issue, they're over here. We're doing this with them. And now I'm working with this group. And now everybody is on the same page. And then and only then can you get what God's original intention was done. Then and only then can it be a total reality. So, once again, the answer to all this is that we are imagers of God. We were created to be like Him. God is free. Therefore, as imagers, we should be free to choose also. If we were not free, then by definition, we would not be like Him. We would simply be automatons, Stepford wives, if I'm dating myself, but some of y'all understand that. So God desires that we love Him and want to follow Him from the standpoint of love. If we aren't free, then we're mere robots programmed to love, and that just does not work. It does nothing. It might make it easier on the person who's the boss, but it does nothing to enrich the relationship. So, if anyone knows who's ever been in a relationship, a programmed love is not what anyone wants. We want our spouses, we want our family and our friends to want to be with us out of a love for us, not out of any obligatory reason. We, just as the heavenly family, are free to rebel or to follow. That's the only way to allow loyalty and faithfulness to be governed by true love. And because of this freedom, because of this love, those who have chosen to follow Jesus have a destiny that's different than anyone else's. But what does that destiny look like? That's what we're going to talk about here today. What does it mean to be a child of God, and how does that play out in not only here and now, but also in eternity? So we've talked about some things that seem to be strange. Granted, I understand that. But we need to allow the Bible to say what it says. You cannot be afraid to let your Bible say what it says, even when it freaks you out. And it does. Because unfortunately, most people have been taught, even at the adult level, Sunday school stories. And you get a very basic framework of theology, and then we try to operate in that. We go out in the world and see that it doesn't really hold up all the time. And then if we are reading our Bibles at all, we come to weird stuff and go, oh, that doesn't fit, throw it out, push it away. You can't do that. If it's weird, it's there for a reason. And it might freak us out. We have to learn to read it and accept it for what it says. And let God be the spokesman here, not our traditions, not what we think, not what is comfortable for us, not what is comfortable for us in the West, just what is comfortable for us in the West as Americans in the 21st century, but let it speak through the context in which it was written. And here's the difficulty I face. When you really start going down that road, it changes things. And when people hear things they're not accustomed to, they can get mad and leave. They get upset. They don't understand. And all of a sudden, you're a heretic. You get into one of my professors says it this way. I was talking to him about this. He said, well, welcome to my world, Eb. He said, when you start studying all this, you get into the original languages and context, this is what happens. He says the conservatives call me a liberal, and the liberals call me a fundamentalist. You just can't win. But if we're going to let the Bible say what it says, and once again, that comes from its original context through the original languages in their world, because this is a maxim for me. It was written for us, But it wasn't written to us. Let that sink in. It was written to people several thousand years ago, pre-scientific world, pre-Greek philosophical age, at least till you get up into the New Testament. And their world was way different from ours. So you read all kinds of stuff like, well, they couldn't have a child, so the husband was given the handmaid. And we go, oh my gosh, this is right out of the soap operas. No, it wasn't. It was a very legal way to produce a surrogate child. Because they couldn't go to the fertility clinic and, draw the, whatever, all that stuff they do, and insert it in. They couldn't do that. And we read, oh my goodness, how scandalous. It wasn't. It was a very legal way of doing things in that culture. So you can't look at it when you're reading the story and come across, oh my gosh, that's scandalous. And then look at, they're relying on the flesh. That's the water in which they swam. That's the way it worked. I don't recommend doing that today. But that's the way it worked back then. So you have to accept that. And then as you read through, you're going to come across more weird stuff like that. And you have to accept it and see what God smiles at, what God might wink, wink, nod at here, there, and what things in the culture He kind of lets go. There are times as you're going through biblical narrative, God speaks to a thing right here, and then it'll happen a book later, and He doesn't necessarily say anything about it. Because He's actually focused on dealing with this person over here with something else altogether. And so we read through, aha, I got them. We're reading the Bible. Look, I found out they messed up here, they messed up here. That's what we're looking at. The important thing is how God works with them through all this. And the fact that He's not shooting lightning bolts down as soon as somebody messes up. Because if He did, the story would have ended right in Genesis 3, and I don't know what we'd be reading now. But you see God constantly working with people, working with culture, working in culture, working sometimes to change culture, but never in a real fast way. It's a time bomb that He puts in that as people's hearts change, then the culture gradually changes. That's just how it works. God doesn't get in a hurry. So, we need to ask ourselves, none of that is in my notes. We need to ask ourselves, do we believe what the Bible says, even if what it says may seem strange to our modern ears? Even if what it says when we dig in may be different from what we have heard in the past. So let's revisit a few passages. Job 1:6. Now there was a day when the sons of God, there's a phrase that should forever now jump off the page at you, came to present themselves before the Lord. Capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. That tells you that this is, in Hebrew, God's name there. Yahweh most of the time, Elohim, what have you. And Satan, we'll get to that, also came among them. Now here's what you have to understand. Your English Bible says Satan. Because most of us, if I ask you, who was Satan? Everybody, oh, it's the devil. And it winds up being that by the time you get to the New Testament. But in the Old Testament, there was no idea of this one archangel that led everybody astray. The Hebrew actually says, the word literally means adversary. In the Hebrew, it's the definite article in front. We talked about that, some of us, this morning. Jason was saying el in Spanish means the. So you go to el carro. That's as much Spanish as I know. The car. All right? Which is a specific car. Well, in Hebrew, it says the Satan or the adversary, meaning one, and there are a bunch of them. It doesn't evolve, if I can put it that way, into one certain arch enemy with horns and a pitchfork and a tail. That's medieval theology. You don't get that until you get to the New Testament. So in Hebrew, all throughout the Old Testament, it is an adversary, the adversary, one of these guys that is playing the prosecutor in a court scene. That's what you've got right here. All right? So in the Old Testament, it's not a proper name, it's a title or a position. All right? The reason they don't put it in English as the adversary, the Satan, because it freaks people out and they'll go, this is a heretical translation and nobody will buy it anymore. That really does figure into printing. Then you've got that phrase, son of God, B'nai. There's the word ha, Elohim, sons of the God, same as Genesis 6. All right, now look at Job 2:1. Same thing, a replay or a similar scene. Again, there was a day when the B'nai Ha Elohim, sons of God, came to present themselves before the Lord, all caps again, and Hasatan, the adversary, also came among them to present himself before the Lord. Same phrases, same context, God meeting with the sons of God, what we've termed as a divine council meeting, and they're dealing with Job and how these guys in the spiritual realm, this particular one is going to deal with Job, and you're probably familiar with the story. Then we've got this in 1 Kings chapter 22. And Micaiah said, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord." All caps again, probably depending on your translation. "I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left." There you go, host of heaven. That's council. There's a bunch of folks standing around him. It's another courtroom scene, another council scene. "And the Lord said, in the midst of all these beings, who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead?" So listen, and this is, oh gosh, you can't believe Jesus, the Lord would want to do this. Listen what he's saying. Who is going to, I put out a hit on King Ahab, because he's about as bad as they get. Who is going to go out and ensure he falls, he dies at Ramoth Gilead? That's the question being asked there. And one, you got many people, just like a board meeting, I got an idea. Hey, they're raising their hands, and he's listening. And one said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, "I will entice him." And the Lord said to him, "By what means?" And he, being the spirit, says, "I will go out, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." Now God's sanctioning a lie? Oh no, that doesn't work in our fundamentalist world. But there it is. God's dealing with this guy on his own level. "I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." And he said, "You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now, therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets. The Lord," and this is Micaiah speaking to Ahab, "the Lord has declared disaster for you." And you go ahead and read the story there. But in all three of these passages, we see God meeting with the sons of God, or all the host of heaven, what have you. In Job, we see that an adversary came from walking the earth and wanting to test Job. In 1 Kings, we don't read of an adversary at that point. Everybody's on the same page there. But several of the council, which literally in Hebrew are these little g gods, for visitors, they are created beings. All right, just think of a souped-up angel and leave it at that if that's what works best for you. But they come up with all these ideas, and then God chose the idea He liked best. And that's the same way God kind of works down here with us. We see how God chooses to work with His people. And once again, that's the way He did up there, and that's the way He does here. He works through us to declare the gospel, to minister to people, to help people, to carry them food, to pray for them, to counsel them, and all that sort of thing. Once again, our purpose mirrors theirs. And this group, this council, has a part in governing things here. And that goes back to the Old Testament too. God, of course, is the CEO, but that group up there, they are allowed to have a part and a say in things. And they can work for God, as they do in 1 Kings, or they can work against God, or against Job, as we saw there, as we saw the adversary do, and as we see in Genesis 6, as well as other places. But what you have to understand is no matter which team they're playing for, God always uses it to accomplish His plan. So they get to choose what team they want to be on, and we do also. So what you have, if you have a proper biblical theology, is you see that predestination and the freedom to choose work hand in hand with God's kingdom rule. That's the way it works. No need to try to divide them up and get hyper-Calvinist on one side or go the other way, super-Armenian on the other. There's no need for that. They mesh and work together. If we would just let them work together instead of trying to build a system to hang our hat on, we'd have a lot less problems in the Bible. But what you see is that God's plan can never be halted. God can take sin and rebellion and still accomplish through His imagers whatever He desires. And so we have this deal. A lot of us are paralyzed. I'm the same way. Sometimes I don't know what to do. God, tell me what to do. And on one hand, I'm begging for a burning bush experience or for an angel to appear at the foot of the bed and tell me, God said, do this, A, B, C, D, and E. I can do that. On the other hand, I'm thinking, if something wakes me up in the middle of the night glowing at the end of the bed, we're probably going to figure out real quick if lead can affect that. Because there are two guns right there next to the bed. And if I even are sane mind enough to pull the trigger, if I don't totally trip out. So, on one hand, I want that. On the other hand, I don't know. What kind of pizza did we eat that night? That's the kind of stuff that comes up. But we're paralyzed sometimes not knowing what to do. And then if I do the wrong thing, is God going to bless me? How's that going to affect my relationship? All this sort of thing. C.S. Lewis kind of addressed this in something he said in the book Perelandra. He said, whatever you do, this is someone who's wanting to serve God. Whatever you do, He'll make good of it, but not the good He had prepared for you if you had obeyed Him. And I think Lewis was right about this, that he knew even if you miss the mark going forward, He's going to honor that. He's going to work through it. If you had figured out, stumbled across, gotten the whole picture maybe of exactly what He wanted done, the blessings would be more abundant. But either way, He's going to work around our stupidity for those that believe in Him. So, how does this sort of thing then play out in our daily lives as well as our eternal destiny? Because we need to have a divine perspective on life and all that life entails. That is something I am trying to hammer home. Because it is very easy in this country where we are so comfortable and just get into the groove of doing life that we lose that eternal perspective. We are to participate with God in liberating people from darkness in order to show people how to live justly and with mercy. And that is important because if that is the first filter that things run through and not our politics, which tends to be the first filter we run things through. And then very quickly, we try to decide, all right, they vote like I do, therefore they must be saved. Or they don't vote like we do, that I do, therefore they're a rank heathen, go pound sand, burn in hell, you demonic. That's the first filter. But you understand, and we'll get to this by the end of the message, that is not the way this thing is supposed to work. We are to be the illustration for those who need to see what it is like to live for Jesus. And that means that doesn't mean that you hem-haw around on major moral issues. That doesn't mean that. But it does mean when we're dealing with someone who doesn't see it the same way, whether they're a believer or not, that you have to have the conversation. You have to leave the dialogue open. You don't just drop the hammer because they disagree with you. Pastor Chief and I, we have some very interesting conversations, and we go into theology and politics and culture, because he comes from the other side of the world, where the culture is actually a lot closer to the Bible than anything we know over here. And so we talk and we don't yell at each other, but we can get a little animated and we can push back. We don't ever get loud, but we're pushing back on wait a minute now. And then usually I wind up going home and thinking about that, working through that, and then it changes the way I think about some things. All of that being said, to say this, is that there are different perspectives on things. Now, when it comes to what God says is right and wrong, I don't wiggle on that. But when it comes to how we get there and leading people to that, that is something else altogether different. And so what I was trying to point out with Pastor Chief is we can see things differently. And we can push back, and I love having that conversation. But it never gets to the point that we're either about to pound each other or that we never want to talk to each other again. And that's because we both realize there is an allegiance higher than anything else we're talking about as far as culture, politics, whatever. Our first allegiance is to Jesus. Therefore, the conversation, the friendship is always there. That has to be the way we live our lives. Or else everybody gets in their echo chamber, we draw a line in the sand, and nobody talks to anybody. And then the camp outside of Christianity is, that's just all those mean people that hate us. That can't be the way. They've got to be seen as, I know that we're going to disagree on a bunch of stuff, but there still has to be something that crosses that bridge that says, we love you even though we disagree with this lifestyle, whatever these issues are. That cannot be the case, or the church ceases to do its job. We are to be, once again, the illustration, not just the words on the page, but the illustration for those who need to see what it is to live for Jesus, in order that they have a foretaste of the kingdom. That is what Jesus was talking about throughout the Gospels. I want you to look at what Paul says. Now you can go to 1 Corinthians 6, verse 1. Look at what Paul says to the Corinthian church once they had lost their divine perspective. Because now they're it's drama in the church. When one of you, he says, has a grievance against another, does he dare go to law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? Meaning the church. Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? That should jump off the page at you. And if the world is to be judged by you, that should jump off the page at us. Are you incompetent to try trivial cases? And right now, I know they're sitting there and listening and they're upset. Who does he think he's talking to? And there goes this thing. Do you not know that we are to judge angels? That should jump off the page at you. How much more then, because of this, because of all the things he's listed, all these things that should have jumped off the page at us, because of that, how much more then matters pertaining to this life, everyday stuff. So if you have such cases, why do you lay them before those who have no standing in the church, meaning those without the church? I say this to your shame. Can it be that there is no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers? To have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. Why not rather suffer wrong? Why not rather be defrauded? But you yourselves wrong and defraud even your own brothers. Or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Now he's fixing to lay down the law on some very serious matters. Now they're suing each other. What's happening here is you got folks in the church suing each other over what Paul has said is trivial matters. And he's making a big distinction between what goes on in the church and what goes on outside the church. And he's saying, why can't y'all settle this among yourselves instead of going to the heathen, pagan, civil, Gentile courts? And then he goes right on into this. He says, do you not know, verse 9, that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? And the reason he says this is because he's telling us one day you're going to have to judge a lot more major things than this. They're not. Yet you're taking your issues to folks that are not going to be tasked with anything near the responsibility you're going to have. What sense does that make? And then he goes on to delineate some things here. Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revelers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. And he's putting those are folks outside the church. Why do you go to them for wisdom in deciding anything when they're not going to be there with you and they're not going to be tasked with all this major responsibility of judging the world, judging angels, all that sort of stuff? And then he ends by this. He says, and such were some of you, were, past tense. But you were washed, you were sanctified, set apart. and you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of our God. Now, if you read Paul's letters, you're going to see something very quickly. That the Corinthian church was always a rough crew for Paul to pastor. I've always said it. When I first got into ministry, one of the books I was tasked to read was a book called The Corinthian Church. And the man that handed it to me said, it's the most depressing thing you will ever read. And after you read this, you will question whether or not you really want to be in ministry. As you can see, I didn't read the whole book all the way through. But in his I've said it many times, if I was a pastor at that church, I would have burned it to the ground and walked away, and I would have gone back like Paul making tents and stuff. But it almost seems, in his letters to Corinth, you read about more drama than at any other church. And it almost seems that the church was about to come apart at the seams. I mean, this is where the guy is, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, this is where the guy is having an affair with his stepmother. And I'm not leaving the church. I don't see anything wrong with it. That's the kind of drama he's dealing with here. But we see in this passage that Corinthians were bickering among themselves about temporal things. And in fact, they were arguing so much that they were actually pursuing lawsuits against one another in civil court. And this upset Paul. But look at why it upset him. That's what I want us to see. All this bickering came about because they had lost their sense of who they were. And all of a sudden, it's all about mine. What is mine? What am I losing? Me, losing something. And as soon as we stand there, we've got issues. They seem to have lost their focus on their roles as Christians, and they had become more enamored at the things of this world. And the result was that they were airing their dirty laundry, and to the outsider, they looked stupid. Their testimony and their mission were now hindered. Now, whatever field you're in, I dare say none of us would want to do anything that affected ours. Talking to Neil, he's in sales. He's not going to want to do anything that affects his sales. All right? And Tom, you're not going to do anything that affects the financial planning and stuff you do for people. You're going to keep that open. And Chuck, you're not going to do anything that affects selling high-performance car parts. Dr. Chuck's not going to do anything that affects negatively his practice as a chiropractor. We're going to stand by those things. We're going to guard those things because they're essential to us. But at the same time, as Christians, there's something that rates above that. Why would we want to do anything, consciously or subconsciously, that would negatively affect that? So to the outsider, they're all looking stupid and hypocritical. Their testimony and their mission is now hindered. But I want you to look at how Paul dealt with it now, and look at once again at 1 Corinthians 6, verses 2 and 3. I want you to look at his rationale behind the chastening he gives them there here. He says, "Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try such trivial cases?" He's downplaying the importance of any of these lawsuits where they're bickering with each other. "Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more then matters pertaining to this life?" The argument is sound. And I wouldn't expect anything less out of Paul, but he asked them rhetorically if they were aware that they would judge the world and the angels, which fits into what we've been talking about for the last few months. And if they are then entrusted to judge on such a large, important scale, the same scale that God gets involved in major ways, then why could they not settle disputes amongst themselves? I mean, good grief. If you are a neurobiologist, brain surgeon, yet you don't know how to treat a simple cut with some, iodine or something in a Band-Aid, that's kind of what he's making a point at right here. If they are entrusted to judge on such a large scale, why can't they deal with the regular stuff of this world that goes on? And then he goes on to say that it would be better to be defrauded. All right, this guy got over on you. He beat you out of a couple of $100. Live with it. Why are you going to court? And now it's all going to be dragged out, and especially nowadays, there's going to be somebody tweeting about it. Christian suing another Christian about $200 because they couldn't. You see, you don't do that. You don't air that sort of laundry. It should be worked out amongst ourselves. We're supposed to have the tools to do that. Love and grace. Yeah, the guy that's wrong here should fess up and do whatever is right to make restitution. But if he doesn't, Paul's saying, live with it. You lost $200. Guess what? I wouldn't loan him another $200. Let's be wise there. Turn the other cheek. Accept the wronging rather than to drag things out in the courts of the world. The point is, as far as we're concerned today, is the responsibility, what we will be doing in eternity, judging up there with God as He judges the world, and that we're going to be judging angels, more technically, those sons of God that fell during the Old Testament. Like I said, it says angels in the New Testament because the Greek just doesn't really have all the words for that. But Paul is getting at something very specific here when he asked him, and he links this problem into judging angels, judging the world, all that kind of stuff. Colossians 1:13-14 says, He has, past tense, delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. Now, from these verses, we see that we've already been delivered from darkness, and we've already been transferred to the kingdom of His Son, Jesus. But this verse, as I said, is in the past tense. So we've already been put in that spot. Yet we don't yet see the kingdom on display in its final form. Everything's not running kosher the way it should. Everything, the world's in an upheaval. America is just in an upheaval right here. All of this that's going to happen is still yet to come. But when it does, and it will, the powers of darkness will be defeated. The demonic, these little g gods, those that rebel, those that have been affecting things and how they run on earth for thousands of years now, will be replaced by whom? By us. By God's glorified human family. Remember last week when we talked about our new resurrected bodies? That's usually the way this is thrown out there. I want you to think about that, and then look at what Jesus says here in Revelation 2. Only hold fast what you have until I come. The one who conquers and who keeps my works until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations. That should jump out at you, the goyim in Hebrew. And he will rule them with a rod of iron, as when earthen pots are broken in pieces. Even as I myself, Jesus speaking here now, have received authority from my Father, and I will give him, who's the him? The object of the verse there in 25, those who hold fast until I come. I will give him the morning star. Important, star language there. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So, when Jesus returns to take His throne on a new earth, this new global Eden, Revelation 21 and 22, Jesus is going to share that rule with us. He's sharing it. We don't become Jesus. We don't come ranked just as high as Jesus. We're not Mormons, okay? That's not what's happening here. But we get to share in that. The principalities that now rule unjustly, once again, go back to Deuteronomy 32, they will take those that rule unjustly in rebellion to God, they will be thrown down, and we will take their place, meaning that we will rule over the nations, verse 26, that's what we just read. The dominions of the fallen council members, however you want to word that, will not be given to faithful angels. All right, so you got Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Then you got what we're terming as the council, which, just like I said, for sake of argument, just call it souped up angels. All right, right here. And you got cherubim, you got seraphim, and then you've got malach or malachim. You've got the regular angels that come down, and guardian angels, and they'll help you here and there, and they come and do stuff in the Bible. You've seen that. And then you've got us here on earth. But what Jesus is saying here is after the judgment, or after He returns, then we who are down here jump the ladder in the chain of command, and we come up here and share in that rule, and we are below God now. We take the place of all those. And the angels are then below us. That's how we judge downward toward them. We're going to jump that chain of command. That is what God has in store for us. We're going to outrank them, rule over them. And that's what Paul was getting at when talking to the Corinthians, chiding them for not being able to resolve their issues among themselves in grace. You can't sort this out amongst yourselves, and yet you're going to have to judge. Some big, big time blunders. It just doesn't work. Now, to deal with something right here, what did Jesus mean by, and I will give them the morning star? I understand that's probably a little problematic. Verse 28. Well, while it seems odd, it speaks of our joint rule with Jesus over the nations. Morning star, and here's what you do. You find that word star. You find morning star. You see how they are used throughout the Bible, preferably in the Old Testament first. And what you see is morning star is used to speak of divine beings in Job 38:7. Look at this. When the morning stars, plural, sang together. And then you have a qualifier here, B'nai Ha-Elohim, all the sons of God shouted for joy. That actually is not contrasting them, it's linking them. Sons of God, morning stars, same thing, different name, different title. That's all that is. So from this passage, we can see that these divine beings were there at creation, and they shouted for joy as the creation unfolded. And then some of them didn't like the plan, at some point after that. And that's where you get the serpent in the garden. But morning star is also a messianic term. And since the Messiah is divine, and this is star language, star, that's called star language, okay? Since this is divine star language, we see that it was sometimes used to describe Jesus in His coming reign. Numbers 24:17. This is familiar to many of us. A star came out of Jacob. A scepter, meaning right to rule, shall rise out of Israel. And in that, we see that Jesus, we know that that's messianic there. Jesus describes Himself this way in the book of Revelation. Go back to Revelation 22:16. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. So you see how this phrase is used. That's how you do good Bible study. Now, when we look back at Revelation, that wording should jump out at us. Not only does Jesus identify Himself as the morning star, but He also says that He will give us the morning star, meaning that He will share His rule with us. Look at what He says once again in the book of Revelation, chapter 3. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and he with me. The one who conquers, here we go again, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on His throne. So you see the equivocation being made there. Jesus ascended to the right hand of the Father and joint rule there, and then He's doing the same thing with us there. Why does Jesus do this? Why does He introduce us to His heavenly family, as we talked about last week? Why does He at that time refer to us as His brothers and sisters? It's important. It's big stuff. Jesus is calling you brother and sister. Don't get all churchified and go, this is kind of churchy talk. No. It means something. He does it in order that He can give us the dominion over the earth that was originally intended through Adam and Eve in Eden. That's how it links back. You've got to understand what the creation story was about. Only at that time, when this happens, will the world be restored to what Eden was originally. So from the first chapters of the Bible, Eden was a focal point of God's plan for mankind, His divine imagers. All right? Therefore, it is no surprise nor coincidence that by the time you get to the last chapter of Revelation, it's taking us right back to Eden. How do I know that? Look at the language of the garden and what was in it and how it was created, and look at the language in Revelation 21 and 22, and see all of that. It's all the similar language. Rivers running out of it, and the plants, and the dews, and the main thing, the tree of life. Look at Revelation 22, verses 1 through 5. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life. Eden had a river running out of it. River, living waters. You see that, and then you see it dropped in throughout the Old Testament. flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side of the river, the tree of life should jump out at us, with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. Don't ask me what, like it's January, bananas. No. And it wasn't an apple in the garden, okay? It's a special, it's a different fruit. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and His servants will worship Him. They will see His face, and His name will be on their foreheads. Oh, so everybody's going to be microchipped with a barcode on it. No, stop. It's bad theology. It's bad eschatology. That's not how the phrase is used anywhere in the Bible. They will see His face, and His name will be on their foreheads, and night will be no more. They will need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign, not just live there, they will reign forever and ever. Now, did you catch the part about the tree of life healing the nations? Nations. Should be something that jumps out at you. The word nations there. The nations that were once dominated by these dark powers, once again going back to Deuteronomy, will then be ruled by the new sons and daughters of God. That's us. The tree of life also is mentioned elsewhere in Revelation. Look at Revelation 2:7 and 11. He who has an ear to hear what the Spirit says to the churches, to the one who conquers I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. What does that mean theologically? Well, those who eat of the tree of life will not be hurt by the second death. All right, we read that. The tree of life is a reference back to Eden, but it also turns us forward to the new Eden. And the first death refers to physical death, brought on by Adam's sin and his expulsion from Eden. And since all of humanity, believers and unbelievers alike, are resurrected, if you read your Bible, before the judgment, then the second death has to refer to the final judgment. That's Revelation 21:8. We don't go through that. We don't go through that final. That is just for the unbeliever. Those who continue to live with God in a new Eden do not suffer the second death, and then even where that leads. So, once again, you've been hit, spitballed with verses from everywhere, and me talking in theological terms and trying to get you, in a Gestalt theory to piece this together. Why does all this stuff matter? Why can't you just come in here and say something in a couple sentences? Well, one, that would cut service time down. That'd mean that the worship team would have to learn about 15 songs. We don't want to do that. Why do I do it? Because I want you to get better at seeing how the Bible works and not just reading whatever's in the light section of the Bible bookstore or picking open a very simple commentary and just going with that without critically thinking through any of it. I want you to think. I want you to learn how all this stuff gets put together so that you learn how not to do bad theology. Many of us as believers have an inadequate view of the afterlife. Now, when you start reading about this, we aren't told everything. We aren't given every detail. God never gives all the details. And so many times what you see in the Old Testament is even when He is giving details, they're very cryptic. So that people living then and there wouldn't necessarily pick up on it. There might be someone going, And as you read Second Temple literature, you see all these scholars are playing around and go, what in the world does this mean? Well, then they start trying to put this together and they're wrestling with it. They're stumbling through it. They're trying to figure it out. But things are cryptic. And then when you get to the New Testament, you'll see Paul, Jesus, Peter. They'll go back and refer to an Old Testament verse and they will do what we call repurpose it. What do I mean by that? The original context in the Old Testament in which that verse was used, they take it, pluck it out, and flip it around. And people don't like that either. I'm a context Nazi. I'm also a grammar Nazi if you're on Facebook. So all you people that type 140,000 word sentence with no punctuation and no capitalization, Stop, please. So we're never given all the details. But if we let the Bible speak, then we see the repurposing. We see that there's new language being used in the New Testament to bring things out of the Old Testament back into the New. But though we're not told everything, we can grasp certain aspects of what awaits us. We know this. We definitely won't be floating on clouds in the form of chubby little babies, playing harps and singing songs forever. And we won't just be lounging around talking to past friends and family, catching up on stuff, and then having them, I saw you, I died 100 years ago, I saw what you did. No. And that's scary, People that you've known have gone on before can see you 24/7. I'm not saying they do. I kind of hope God's got like a filter, where they don't see, But we're not going to be sitting around talking about that kind of stuff either. Or just be doing that. We will be busy, I can tell you this. We will be busy enjoying and caring for what God has made. As stewards, same thing Adam and Eve did. They didn't just lounge around picking fruit. They were to be stewards over the garden and all that God did. They didn't have to work as hard and slog through plowing the fields and all prior to that. But they still had to tend to things. But we're going to be doing this side by side with friends and family, other humans, and those that were up there that remain loyal to God. There will no longer be any sort of separation between heaven and earth. Now think about that. Sometimes I think we're just so cynical that we almost can't think about it. Or we just kind of downplay it, what it really means. It's like, you mean there's not going to be any video games in heaven? I hope not. I know there won't be any soccer in heaven. Hey, that's all they play over there, man. No, there'll be plenty of SEC football and baseball and that sort of thing. But that is going to be going on and working and stewarding over, and we don't have all the details of what it'll be like. Anything past that is supposition and extrapolation and trying to figure, I don't know. But knowing our destiny, knowing that part, should mold our thinking in the here and now. What Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2, verses 7 through 9. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. That's been talked about a long time. None of the rulers of this age understood this. We've been over this verse. For if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. We talked a couple of weeks about what that meant. But as it is written, this is the part I want to draw your attention to, what no eye has seen nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love Him. So as groovy as everything seems that we do know about, there's no way to put a limit on what we don't know about or how great it would be. We can only begin to imagine what God has prepared for us, and that's what Paul is clearly saying here. So, practical application. We either live with our destiny in view or we don't. We either live with our destiny in view or we can be like the church at Corinth, which had forgotten their place and mission as imagers in God's kingdom now, as well as their future place. And not keeping that in sight is what allowed them to act like a bunch of morons, not only in church, but outside of church. All because they failed to see or appreciate or totally understand just what their place was in eternity. Our awareness of what lies in store for us should alter our behavior for the better. Now think about it. We will live and reign with believers from all over the world, from all points in history, all colors, creeds, socioeconomic status, cultures, all that kind of stuff. But also think about it in the now. Going back to the drama in the church at Corinth where the church folks were biting each other's heads off over money and other things. Ask yourself this. Would you criticize, fight, cheat, talk about someone if you knew you were going to have to share an apartment with them for eternity? Think about that. And I'm not talking about a big apartment. I'm talking about, a little college dorm room type thing. If you knew you're going to have to live with this person, for eternity, and you don't get along now, how would that change the time you invest with them and how you invest that time with them? I don't believe if we knew we were going to be sentenced, I'll use that word, because I can think a lot of folks right now, I don't want to spend eternity with them, Lord, I really don't. It's a big place. The new heavens and the earth, that's a big place. You can put them over there, and I'll just stay over here. And I'm sure they're thinking the same thing about me. But the point is, God is saying, nope, that is not allowed. That is not allowed. It will not be tolerated. You understand? And thankfully, we will get our minds be totally renewed, so it shouldn't be an issue. But I don't believe we would. If we knew that for a fact, I'm going to be in that little room with that person for eternity, I don't think we would act toward them the same way. I believe we would invest more time in getting to know them, encouraging them, and working with them. Because you see, when we understand our purpose and identity, it focuses us on what is good for the church as it works in this world. And I was talking about the church. I'm just talking about the institution. I'm talking about us as a family. It focuses us on the will of God rather than our own little agendas, which is what was happening in the church at Corinth. It will focus us on evangelism and discipleship rather than just how much money we're stockpiling for retirement or how many toys we get. And that stuff is important, but that's not the main thing. We have to ask ourselves, how is it that we don't put as much energy into moving the unbeliever towards Jesus and His kingdom as we do in engaging with him or her as an enemy? That's the way it happens in war. They teach you right quick. You go to combat, you might be a little sanctimonious at first, but once the other side starts shooting at you, you demonize the enemy. You almost have to do that in order to shoot back. That's what plenty of military folks in here, you understand that. That's the way it works. Here for us, as soon as we demonize them, shut it down. The conversation's gone. Pity them. I feel sorry for them. So am I going to draw the line and start hammering them and calling them whatever names, or do I want to have an opportunity to witness to them? The Corinthian church also had an issue with vying for status among themselves. We didn't read that today, but you can go back and read it, and you'll see that. Do we have that issue? Vying for status either within the church or outside the church. Look at it this way, as far as our eternal destiny goes. How much of His rule would Jesus have to share with us to make us happy? Why then do we bicker with each other for an advantage, for attention, or for personal gain? We're either content to rule and reign with Jesus, or we are not. How are we clamoring for stuff inside that bubble? See, this is challenging. This is, to quote, what's his face in Cool Hand Luke, a whole lot of world shaking going on. George Kennedy, I don't remember the name of his character. But this should be shaking. If you think about this, it totally changes the way we go about living our lives. So it is time now to live as though we know who we are and we know the plans God has for us, whether in the immediate future or the world to come. The fact is, you cannot separate them. And if we understand that and we chew on it and we appreciate it, then it totally changes the way we act. And now, especially as today is Valentine's Day, for those of us who were stupid yesterday like me and get in an argument with my wife, I got a whole lot of candy buying to do. Which doesn't work because then she accuses me of trying to make her fat. I'm the typical guy. Honestly, I don't know what to get half the time. Carrots? Like vegetables? Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing. When I go to buy jewelry, they call it back home, that price tag is, whoo, that's scary to me. So I always get the wrong thing anyway. So that's my excuse for not buying all those carrots. And plus, I know we always trick y'all just going to take it back and exchange it for store credit and cash anyway. I'm learning. These ladies are in cahoots on that kind of stuff, buddy. Anyway, y'all get the point, hopefully. Will y'all bow your heads, please? Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, help us to understand our destiny, our fate, our part in your plan, Lord, and then how that works and what are to be our plans in this world. Father, I just ask that once again you would impress that on us, to whatever level of understanding we have of this. Lord, we've only skimmed the top of all of this that we've been going through for weeks now. Father, I just pray that it starts sinking in. It just starts trickling down through the soil to get into our roots, Lord. And Lord, please change our behavior. Change us from the heart working its way out, because we know of you and how that natural growth, not a list of do's and don'ts, but Lord, change us from the inside out because of love, because of relationship, Father. That's what we're asking. I just ask you to start doing that now. And I pray that we're able to think on these things as we go through the week. Father, I ask you to bless everyone here with a happy Valentine's Day, Lord. Keep everyone safe in the weather. Be with those in our church family that are hurting and that are sick, Father. We still pray for their healing. And Lord God, we mostly pray, come back soon. And we thank you that you are, Father. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Y'all be blessed.